The book of Revelation is the go-to book for all things end times. If you want to know about the end times and what's going to happen, how things are going to play out, you have to go to the book of Revelation. This is the book that God gave us to show us the things that are going to happen. We can know, for example, the month of the rapture. Okay, this is not hard. Okay, this is actually really simple. It's spelled out for us using symbols, but it's still rather clear. It shouldn't be hard for us to determine the month that the rapture is going to take place. I know a lot of people over the years have sort of guessed at, what days or what feast day. And then there's people who say, well, you can't know at all because the rapture is totally imminent and it'll happen on a day that nobody knows. Well, the book of Revelation actually shows us that there is a rapture that nobody knows when that will be. But it's not the first one. Okay, the first one, we actually know the month when that's going to take place. It's in Revelation 12. And a lot of people who watch this channel, as well as other Watchman channel, are aware that in 2017, there was an astronomical alignment that fulfilled every single one of the criteria for this sign, this great sign that God placed in the heavens, in the starry heavens, that basically put us in the book of Revelation. Now, a lot of people, including myself, were sort of thinking that we would be raptured in 2017 because the Revelation 12 sign was there in the sky. The thing is, though, is that our rapture is not connected with the great sign. It's not connected with the sign of Revelation 12:1. And I'll just read that really quick. A great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars. She was with child, and she cried out in her pangs of birth in anguish for delivery. Okay, so this was the sign of Virgo, and the month when the sun is in Virgo is in the 7th month of the Hebrew year, which corresponds to our September-October. So that's the beginning of the month, okay, when the crescent moon is under her feet. There was a planet, Jupiter, that was in retrograde motion inside of Virgo for 9 months, which is the full term gestation. And then there was a crown of 12 stars over her head, which is the 9 stars of the constellation Leo, plus the wandering stars of Mercury, Mars, and Venus. So that sign is over, and we don't see anything about a child being born in the Revelation 12 sign. And I know there's another supposed sign, Revelation 12 sign, that's scheduled to appear again, sort of over this same period of time, but it's not this one. It's not the one that's in the book. And in fact, our rapture is not connected with the Revelation 12 sign. Our rapture is actually connected with the next sign of Revelation, which is a different sign. And the next sign is, I call it the sign of the dragon. It's in that little story that we read about in Revelation 12, verses 3 through 5, that tell us the story of our rapture. So whenever you see the sun in Virgo, and that's what this is, the sun is in the constellation of Virgo, the woman, it's the only woman on the ecliptic plane, we know we're in the Hebrew month of Tishri. It's the 7th month. And because the child isn't born until you get down to verse 5, we're later on in the month. The birth of the male child is not on the day of the Revelation 12 sign. It's in conjunction with the sign of the dragon. So what is the sign of the dragon? Well, the first thing it's not an astronomical alignment. The sign of the dragon is not talking about astronomy anymore. That was the great sign, the sign of the woman, that talked about that. And the confusion comes is because both signs appear in heaven. But you have to ask yourself, what heaven? In Revelation 12, 1 and 2, it's the sun and the moon at her feet, and there's stars, and it's the starry heavens. But in this next sign, we're not talking about the starry heavens anymore. We're talking about the heaven that we want to be raptured to. We're talking about the place where God dwells. We're talking about God's throne. We're talking about Satan, who's going to take a third of his stars and cast them to the earth. We're talking about a woman who gives birth to a male child. We're talking about a woman in hard labor. And so all we really need to do right now is decode it. So let's look at those verses real quick. It's just a few verses here in Revelation chapter 12, verse 3. And another sign, or a different sign, appeared in heaven. Behold, a great red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns, and 7 diadems upon his heads. And his tail swept down a third of the stars of heaven, and cast them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman who was about to bear a child, that he might devour her child when she brought it forth. And she brought forth a male child, one who's to rule all the nations with a rod of iron. And her child was caught up, that is harpazo, caught up to God and to his throne. So this is the rapture passage here. So the rapture is going to be in the same month that we see the sun is in the woman. That's the month of Tishri. It's the 7th month. Okay, so that symbol kind of stays the same. If the sun is in Virgo, we know we're in the 7th month. So now we're looking at later on in the month of Tishri. So let's sort of decode some of this. So we know that the dragon is Satan, because that's made very clear to us in Revelation 12, verse 9. And the great dragon was thrown down, that ancient serpent, who is called the devil and Satan, the deceiver of the whole world. The woman is the remnant of Israel who is going to flee into the wilderness. This is the remnant of Israel that is talked about in Zechariah 13 and 14. And Jesus referred to in Matthew 24, when you see the abomination of desolation, that you're to flee into the wilderness. Later on in Revelation 12, we see the woman fleeing into the wilderness. Actually, it's in verse 6. The woman fled into the wilderness. This is the remnant of Israel. This is that group of Israel who will be the foundation of the nation of Israel during the millennium. They'll be kept safe for 3.5 years. So the dragon is Satan. The woman is Israel. The child, hopefully, is you and me. And the baby is going to be born as a result of travail. You got to have labor, and then you can have a baby. So in what way is Israel going to go into travail? Okay, that's a question we have to ask here, because it's part of the symbolism. And the Old Testament gives us a definition symbolically for what travail means. It's a war or an invasion or some real terrible calamity. Israel is going to have a war or an invasion, a terrible calamity. That's her travail. When the travail is over, there's a child that's born, or the child is born at the same time the travail is over, because once you have the baby, you don't really have any more hard labor. The birth of the child, though, is not the same thing as the child being caught up. And in between the birth of the child and the child being caught up, we've got a period of time where the dragon is going to try to devour the child. Okay, to devour means to swallow up, to make war against. In the Old Testament, the word for warring was the same root word as to devour or to eat something up. And Joshua and Caleb, when they talked about the giants in Canaan, they said they are bread for us. Well, in other words, we'll be able to just eat them up, because we have more power than they do, because their protection has been removed. So when we're talking about devouring, we're talking again about warfare. Spiritual warfare is going to be taking place. The child will be born in the month of Tishri, the 7th month, the month when the sun is in Virgo. It's not going to be on the Feast of Trumpets. It's going to be later on in the month, and it's going to be over a feast day. And now we just have to ask some questions. Is there a feast day that is associated with the birth of a child? Is there any connection there at all? Well, personally, I believe that Jesus was born in the fall over the Feast of Tabernacles, which happens to be a 7-day feast that has an 8th day at the end. So if Jesus was born on the first day of Tabernacles, he would have been circumcised on the 8th day. We know that anytime you see a firstborn male child, you always have 8 days. The child cannot be dedicated to God or redeemed until the 8th day. So is there a 7-day feast in the 7th month of Tishri that we could make some connections with this male child? And the answer to that is yes. That's the Feast of Tabernacles. And we're told that we're going to exchange this tent that we're living in now for a permanent dwelling, a permanent home. And during the Feast of Tabernacles, the Jews lived in temporary dwellings in great joy. And then on the 8th day, they went to their permanent home. So much symbolism here that ties in with our being changed from mortal to immortal. That's our birth. Being here on earth for 7 days and having to engage the dragon and his fallen angels. And on the 8th day then, being caught up to God and to his throne, being presented to God as the redeemed male heir, co-heir with Christ. So we can know the month of this rapture right here. It's the 7th month. It's not on the Feast of Trumpets. It's going to be later in the month. It's associated with an 8-day period of time, and there is a feast of joy that's associated with 8 days. That's the Feast of Tabernacles, and all the symbolism that goes into our change and our being taken to heaven and glorified all fits in with the Feast of Tabernacles. So I hope you can see how we know when this one is going to take place. We know when this rapture is going to take place. The day that we don't know the day or the hour, that's when the day of the Lord begins, and that won't begin until after the abomination of desolation, but before the second coming of Christ. And there is a rapture associated with that day that we don't know the day or the hour. And because we don't know the day or the hour of when the day of the Lord will begin, we don't know when that rapture will take place either. But that's for another video. Let me know what you think in the comments section, and we'll see you on another video. Till then, have a blessed day.